So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Thomas Sheridan.
Hello? Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. Thanks again, Ian. Psychopaths, okay, it's a big subject. It seems on the surface like a very heavy subject, and indeed it is a very dark subject, but it's the whole idea of you discover who your enemy is, then you know how to fight. And since the time I was a kid, the world never made any sense to me. It just didn't. And I think to many people here, and many people in the world, even if they don't admit it, they know that the world doesn't make any sense either. And then about the mid-1990s, through a series of circumstances, I became very interested in the field of psychopathology, mainly because I was working at Goldman Sachs at the time, and I was surrounded by psychopaths. I was a graphic designer, so I'm guiltless in terms of anything that you may be suffering from those people. It's kind of ironic, is I used to be an employee of Goldman Sachs, and since the yes vote went through in Ireland the other day, magically I'm a Goldman Sachs employee once again, just like all Irish citizens. So everything comes full circle, unfortunately. Now, as Ian said, I ordered a book called Puzzling People, which did fairly well. And the original idea with the book was to actually deal with the subject in the sort of the geopolitical sense. And then I had a website, and it was like a message board, and I was doing development. And more I found out that these issues impacted people in their personal lives as well. It wasn't just, a case of psychopathic politicians, business leaders. It was also embedded within every aspect of society. And what was also very uncanny to me was how all the traits and the pathologies of people who experience a psychopath in their personal life, whether it was a bully at work, a dangerous relationship, or just someone that abused and moved in on their family or their friends or whatever, or broke up a social circle in a committee or something, it was exactly the same methodology they used to destroy those people as what the ones at the top, the psychopaths at the top, do to mess up the rest of us and to mess this world up. So this became a kind of a maxim. It was the idea of like, as above, so below, became like, what the psychopath you meet in your life is the same as the psychopath that runs the world. So it became a very powerful tool for me personally, because I could take people's personal experience and allow them to scale it up to the world. And suddenly, not only does their life make sense, or strange issues in their life, or strange periods of their life make sense, but also the world begins to make sense, because you suddenly understand that we're actually a species under attack. I know that may sound like hyperbole, but there's actually two species of human beings on this earth. There's the empathic, normal human being, and there's the predatory element within the human race, which are known as psychopaths. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Now, this is going to be a dark kind of thing. It may trigger memories that some of you have had of people you knew in your past. In fact, I'll be surprised if it didn't trigger any memories, because everybody in some way has been impacted on this. Before I start, do not be diagnosing yourself while I'm doing this, because we all have many of the traits, okay? The difference between, and we've all done things in our lives that we're ashamed of and we shouldn't have done, but the difference between us and a psychopath is we actually cared about what we've done. We know right from wrong. We often did it out of stupidity or selfishness, but it wasn't done out of a planned methodological way to destroy another human being or another entity, or to capitalize on destroying an organization. We just found ourselves, like any other human being, shit happens. A psychopath is very different. They know exactly what they're doing. They will plan it to the nth degree, and they will carry it out without a care in the world, and absolutely no compassion, remorse, or any kind of even consideration of what they've done to others. It's just business. Now, what is a psychopath really? Well, the term psychopath has been in use for about 100 years, more or less around from the 1880s, 1890s on. In the 1940s, it was scientifically quantified by an American psychiatrist called Herbie Cleckley, who wrote a groundbreaking book called The Mask of Sanity. And he described the psychopath as a fully functioning mimic of an otherwise normal human being who hides an internal chaos behind a mask of sanity, and then uses this mask of sanity to impose their sense of internal chaos upon a person, an individual, a family, an organization, an entire continent. It's the same thing. They create order for themselves by imposing their chaos upon us. Now, psychopaths are, according to Western figures, I've used the official figures here, I think this might actually be a little high. I think it'd probably be close to 3% or 2%. But I'm just going what the NHS in the UK, the European Union, and the North American figures. They round off to 4% of this population is psychopathic to some degree. That means the vast majority of them are just shifty users, manipulators, parasites who just use people, discard them as if they're an old Coke can, and walk on as if they never existed. All the way up to serial killers, politicians, and the big business leaders who have the world in a mess today with this sort of predatory, pathological capitalism that we're living under. They excel in corporations, media, and government. They're all social parasites. No psychopath is capable of autonomy in their own lives or in any other case. They live off the energy, sweat, labors, capital, and emotions of others. This is why they do so well within particularly things like media, because they hide behind these personas and these masks. As I said, they hide behind a mask of sanity. What's in there is quite different than what the rest of us is. They have difficulty processing information across the cerebral cortex, the cerebral partitions of their brain. So the brain is functioning. It's not like their brain damaged. It's not like, there's lots of stuff out there to try and make out their brain damaged. They're not brain damaged. Their brains are like us. They just choose not to use the parts of their brain that contain empathy and so on for others. It's a horses for courses kind of situation. It's just like when you develop your brain, it will according to your needs in life. We'll be talking about that later on. They project their internal psychological chaos onto their targets. This is a sign of all pathology, not just psychopathology, is the idea that I would take my faults and then project them upon you. If I was working in a place and I was stealing the stuff, I would say, and I was caught, I would try to make out that the boss was stealing from somebody else and somehow I deserve to do this. If I attacked you and beat you up, my rationale would be, well, you deserved it. I should have attacked you before you attacked me. They live in a state where they're always trying to get you before you get them. And this is often done through projection, by projecting their faults onto you. And they're incapable of being cured, and they see nothing wrong with their behavior. See, this is an important point. This is what makes my work very different than many other people. Because I'm not an academic, I'm not owned by anybody. I'm not owned by a university. I'm not owned by a government. I don't play the mainstream media game, and my information is getting out there for the simple reason that I know from all the work that I've done, it is not rooted in some kind of neurological, thus so far, or DNA thing. The proof just isn't there. There's a lot of wishful thinking, there's a lot of suggestion, there's a lot of paths being followed to bring us to that point, but it still hasn't been there yet. They just seem to appear out of completely normal families. There was a recent article in the New York Times where they had a very disturbing article, but very insightful and very important for the mainstream media to actually acknowledge this at last, about childhood psychopaths, children who are actually psychopaths, and they got them to this center in Florida. And all these children came from normal, loving homes. They were not products of inner city ghettos, alcoholic parents, or misuse, or no love. They just seem, and the other siblings in the family were normal. They just seem to arrive. And this is an excuse that's kind of always used, like, oh, well, psychopaths are a product of a poor environment and bad families and bad nutrition and no education and so on. I mean, I didn't know that Tony Blair was born in the South Bronx or somewhere like that, and this is what we have to deal with. They're everywhere. This is why I wrote this book, because there's an element, all the work has been done on prisoners, in male prisoners, and it's very handy for the control system to deflect psychopathology upon the working classes and the poor and marginalized groups, so we're not looking at them. This is always why they filled us with the idea of the serial killer and Norman Bates. They're always keeping our eye off the ball. And they see nothing wrong with their behavior, and they're never cured. It's been shown in MRI scans and diagnostic testing right until they're old people in prison or in retirement homes. They're exactly the same. They're just as predatory as what they were when they were in their teens and 20s. It's just they don't have the energy anymore to go about it, but they'll be still doing things like stealing money off the other residents and tampering with their medication and so on. Now, they all have a series of behaviors that they all undertake. And this is what makes them very easy to identify after you've made yourself fully knowledgeable. It's not, you just can't read my books or any other books or see a video and walk down the street and go, he's a psychopath, she's a psychopath. That's a very dangerous thing to do because it creates a witch hunt mentality. However, if you find yourself in a job, a relationship, or even you're seeing it in the global thing, in the sort of the financial or political, geopolitical sphere, if you have this knowledge that I'm giving you today, it can help unlock a sort of a path out of a labyrinth that doesn't make any sense to something that does make some sense, that you're actually dealing with a psychopathic individual. The first one you should look out for is a thing called gaslighting. This comes from an old movie called Gaslight, where the plot of the film was that a wealthy widow was being driven slowly insane by her husband. He was doing things like turning down the gas lights in their apartment and he was telling her there's no change in the light, so that was to make her believe she was going mad. This is what they do. They try to impose their insanity upon us by making us think we're insane in order to manipulate us and control us. I got a letter last year from a guy in America. His father he'd been working away from his father. His father lived alone, and he'd been living in this house, a suburban house. And a young guy moved in, and he was very friendly next door. And the young guy one day noticed, some of your slates are hanging off your roof. Let me fix it for you. So without the old guy even saying yes or no, he pulled the ladder up, got up on the roof and tidied the slates. When he got down, the old guy said, oh, that's great, how much do I owe you? And he says, that's what neighbors are for. You see, they're very charismatic, they get you this way, they're very friendly at first. He goes, that's what neighbors are for, sure, we're pals now, we might as well be friends. And then the old guy said, well, do you want to come in and have a beer or something? So he brought him in, and then the next thing he knows, he's the surrogate son. The young guy is coming over all the time, they're watching the sports on the TV, and the old guy suddenly feels young again. He has a friend who's like 40 years younger, nice friendly young guy who helps him with chores, and his son is away. So this young guy next door is fulfilling these missing needs in the psychopath's life, and you find this is very common. And then one day out of the blue, the young guy walks in, the young psychopathic young guy walks in and gets the remote control and switches off the TV. And the old guy goes, why did you do that? And he goes, what do you mean? You just switched off the TV while watching the baseball. And he goes, I didn't switch off the TV. And he goes, you did. I just see you pick up the remote, and I saw you switch it off. And the psychopath goes, what are you on about? We're watching the game right now. And they're so convincing at lying, and they're so dangerous at mind games, and they're so wicked in this regard. This is not a sick person who needs our love and help, because this is a dangerous predator we're dealing with. And what happened eventually was he was trying to make the old guy believe he had Alzheimer's and then sign over his estate to him. Fortunately, the son returned in time to stop it. But that's called gaslighting. Projection, we've already spoken about, projecting their faults onto you. A psychopathic parent who may be an alcoholic or have a drink problem will accuse his son or his daughter of being alcoholics. To deflect from the fact that it's him. They're all, in their own minds, they're always perfect. They're always, they're incapable of any kind of wrongdoing. They all have this internal God complex, and they'll go to extreme lengths to justify it. Invented personas, as I told you, there's no personality in there. There's nothing. There's just nothing. They're like a biological robot, and within there is a predatory consciousness. And to move through society, this predatory consciousness becomes a persona. Tell me what you want to be, and I'll be it. What do I need to manipulate these people? Who do I have to pretend I am? What hobbies do I have to pretend I have? What interests do I pretend I have to have? They create an actor, a persona, and that persona is what's used to fool people, to get them to give them their trust. Love bombing appealing to emotions. This is because they're very aware from the time they're a child that if they, teenagers mainly, that if they react a certain way to a person, they'll win that person's trust. Now, they don't know it scientifically or anything like that, but when you're constantly told you're wonderful and you're perfect and you're beautiful and you're amazing, it releases things in your brain like dopamine, which is, and the reward circuits in your brains also react to this as well. You feel a sense of comfort or pleasure. In women, the oxytocin receptors in the brain become hyperactive. Then what happens then is you become slowly addicted to this, being this wonderful, this feeling, being told you're constantly perfect, you're wonderful. And then out of the blue one day, they switch it off. And what happens then is you literally have a chemical crash, because you become addicted to the rushes of these chemicals in your brain. Next thing you do is you want to get that back. You want to get back the feeling we had in the old days. You want to get back to that friendship that was amazing for 6 months. You want to get back to that politician who wooed you when you canvassed for him during the election, and as soon as he was elected, he transformed into a different human being. Then you're susceptible because you're literally a junkie. And they know this. They learn this stuff. They teach themselves this stuff as kids. The sexual and the ardent students of human psychology. Now, you imagine you don't have any feelings, you don't have any emotions, you don't have any compassion even for your closest family members, your wife, your kids, even your pets. You may pretend you do. Imagine you don't. It leaves all the time in the world for you to observe emotional reactions in others, how they behave, how they think, and that you can learn how to work a person. And this is reflected in the greater psychopathic control grid system, as I call it, because they're obsessed with learning everything about us. This is why they're constantly giving us surveys. This is why they're constantly quizzing us. All these NGOs, Quangos, and all these other intergovernmental organizations are obsessed with gathering every piece of data on us. They see us literally, and I'm not being hysterical here, as an invading species upon their planet. And they're monitoring and they constantly want to know everything about us because they don't know how we really feel inside. To them, it's a conceptual idea. We're almost like a computer simulation or something to them. So they're very obsessed both in a personal sense and on the collective sense of understanding us completely and then altering our psychology. Sexual and identity politics is a very big thing with them. This is why we live in a world today where everything is identified through your gender, your race, your religion, and at the same time you're told that you're living in a world where everyone is equal and no one should be seeing differences between each other. They're constantly feeding us all this information like white men are the enemy, young single mothers. On one hand, they should be taken care of by the state, but on the other hand, these young mothers on welfare are given bad names. They're constantly pigeonholed. They're parasites on the system who produce children who are no good to the world. It's constantly judging people according to their race, religion, and their social circumstances because they see us ultimately as not a human being, but as some kind of, or not one of them, but as a kind of they study us like a botanist would study a flower, or something like that. And they're very obsessed with getting us into different racial and ethnic and gender groups because ultimately it's a divide and conquer tactic. And again, as I said, no remorse, don't care. Compassion or accountability. How you see these CEOs of these big Wall Street firms, they give themselves enormous bonuses when the company has lost billions. They've laid off 10,000 employees, and their attitude is like, hey, it's my money, I deserve $100 million. That's the psychopathic mind. This is why, since the 1980s with Reaganomics and so on, these kind of, this idea that the only thing that, we'll hear John Perkins talking about this later, the only thing that matters is the profit. Well, if the only thing that matters is the profit, all you're ever going to get is the psychopath. Now, transitional personas, they move between personas, and people often catch them out this way. You'll actually see in a personal relationship, if you're a personal relationship with a psychopath, and they'll say the previous relationship is ending and the new one is beginning, you'll actually see them changing, becoming somebody else. They'll start taking an interest in hobbies out of the blue they had no interest in. They're crafting this new persona for the next target. The same thing happens with the system. You see the politicians, the psychopathic politicians, they start privatizing the utilities, the railways, the telecoms, and the next thing you know, in 5 years' time, these fellows you talked about, open competition and everything should be in the open market, are suddenly the CEOs, directors of these same companies that they just happened to have privatized while they were in government. So they were their whole purpose in government as an elected politician was to make the transition between public services and private services, and then, feed off the trough when the little creation came true. Word salad. Donald Rumsfeld, there are known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown knowns. They have an ability to overuse language. They will never get to, if you want to get to the point of something, like Where's my $100 million that I invested? You will get reports, endless words, diversion, speeches that don't make any sense. And this is right across the whole psychopathic spectrum, from academia to media to politics, where there's an overuse of words where you cannot get to the root of anything. Legalese documents are the same thing as well. They're designed to confuse, bewilder, and create almost a sort of a pathological syntax that only these adepts are capable of understanding. And that's to flush us out, to deliberately create a division between them and us. Mirroring is when they, again, it's very similar to love bombing. They pretend they're just like you. The man of the people, the politician who's the man of the people, you know, he goes around pressing the flesh. He has pictures of babies. Do you ever notice most of these politicians, when the baby is being kissed, the kid is like this? That's intuition, and we're going to be talking about that later on. They have taken this away from us. And this is also why psychopaths are extremely rare within indigenous societies, because we've always known about these things, and, you know, we've solved them. But unfortunately, probably since the time of Babylon, when this system that we're kind of living in now allowed them to hide and then change our reality to think that they were normal. I often find pets will often react to them the same way too. And so it's very interesting. Next time you see a politician holding a baby and the baby looks like he's about to be eaten, pay attention. Phony altruism. Oh, this is a great one. You know, an arms dealer, I killed 100 million people in the war, I destroyed an ethnic group. Hey, but I gave money to African orphans. I moved into your home, I stole your mother's savings, I sold the cat to the laboratory, I took the house, I set fire to it and collected the insurance. But I bought her flowers for her birthday. They don't understand the full range of emotions. They just think everything is a reward circuit. And incredible promises that are never delivered. Hey, democracy, that's it, isn't it? They promise you the sun, the moon, and the stars before you're elected. And as soon as you get in there, whatever. We never said that, and they act like it never happened. And then we say to ourselves, well, how is this possible? Are they such monumental hypocrites? We say to a normal person says to ourselves, this is a level of hypocrisy I can't understand, because it's not hypocrisy, it's psychopathology. We cannot apply our minds to them. And idealization and devaluation. This is very common with all psychopaths. They're like the kid on Christmas morning who says, I want the toys, I want the toys, I want the toys. And when they get the toys by lunchtime, Christmas dinner, they've no interest in them anymore. And they're like that. The ones at the top are like that with corporations. This is why they're constantly buying companies, making deals. And this is why they're still buying lotto tickets when they have like billions in the bank. They're constantly trying to find a new thrill. This also plays into the hypersexuality of psychopaths. They're always looking for something new to do, some new scam. And then they quickly get sick of it and they begin devaluing it. In this financial global sphere, they will buy companies, get what they want from them, and deliberately crash them by crashing the stock price. In a relationship, they'll do the same thing. They'll idealize the person. As soon as they're married, as soon as they've got them where they want them, then they'll just say, this is bullshit, and they'll go on and start devaluing them and move on to something else. It's not so much an emotional infantilism. It's just like an inability to find that one thing they're searching for, which they never get. It's like an itch that they can never scratch. And it doesn't matter how much power and how much glory and everything they achieve, it's never enough. That's why you have these 90-year-old, statesmen going around the world, talking about wars and getting involved in geopolitical. They never stop. This is also why pedophiles are pedophiles till the day they die. They never grow out of it. They're driven constantly by very, very different things than we are. The reason why they're hypersexual is they all seem to have high levels of the hormone testosterone. They all have missing past histories and strange life stories. These politicians, don't they just seem to come out of nowhere? You never see pictures of them when they're young. You might get a Channel 4 documentary where they're making up some story where he used to be a band manager or he was involved in something else, but you can never really confirm it. And the same as if you worked with a psychopath, he comes into the company one day and he has all these stories, he was this, that, and the other, but you can never find a confirmation of it. Because those pasts are not them now. You see, that's how they are. They have this whole idea of if I went to this gentleman here right now and say I punched him, right, and for no reason I punched him, and then a year later he came up to me and he says to me, you hit me that day, you hit me, and I said, I never hit you. You did. Everyone in this room saw it. And I'd say, oh, no, I didn't. What the psychopath is really saying is the previous version of me, the one from last year, is what hit you, and I'm not responsible for it now. A recent survey was done on prisoners in Canada where they actually were talking about where they actually identified the psychopaths in the prison, and then they asked them about their actual, what they'd actually done with their crimes, and they talk about them in a past sense that's very different. It's very spooky than the rest of us. The idea being that they would say things like, you're in here for 15 years for raping 3 women. And he'd say, well, no, I'm not a rapist, though. But you were caught red-handed doing it. Yeah, I was a rapist then, but I'm not a rapist now. You see, the previous version of them was responsible. This is how you can have Tony Blair. It's very difficult for me to say his name without, gritting my teeth. But this is why you can have Tony Blair. He's Mr. Yeah, go on, go. Lose the fear and see them for how absurd they really are below, and that's what takes them down, not fear. And you see that with him. He's a war criminal who started a war under false pretense, and then now he's Mr. God going around the world with his interfaith thing, Mr. Opus Dei or whatever, becoming a Catholic so he can get the presidency of Europe. The Tony Blair 10 years ago was responsible for that, not the one now, psychopath. Using pity to manipulate. This is how they mostly approach it in a personal relationship. But they do it. You see the politicians doing it as well. They'll always try to make out, I never had it as a child. I was very poor. My parents were abusive. And no one ever really cared about me. Now, some of it could be true, but often it isn't. It's just made to find empathic people. They are a food source specific individual. They need to find people who are kind, compassionate, concerned, and caring, and they're the ones that they know that they can manipulate the most. Now, democracy is fantastic for psychopaths. You'd think it was a totalitarian regime would be the best way for them. That's going to be pretty good as well, but that's usually a bloody way to get to the top. You have to have a few assassinations, build up a gang, and do all kinds of nasty, dirty things. They don't like getting their hands dirty. They'd rather have someone else do it. That's why they send us to fight their wars while they give themselves they write their biographies how wonderful they are. So democracy, unfortunately, is, I would describe it as an interactive play where every 4 years you're allowed to clap for the one actor or the other, but the script behind the scenes still goes on because it's the same play they're following. So it's just an illusion democracy now. It's unfortunate. We should find a way out of this, and I have a feeling that one day we will, because in Ireland recently there was only 20% of the people turned out for the fiscal treaty vote. That shows that 80% have seen through the scam for what it is, and this is why the media is always bemoaning, we must have more democracy, much more voter participation. We've got to have more people voting. You see, what's happening then, when you're voting for a system that's completely rigged for 2 parties that are almost identical, what you're really doing is you're giving a mandate to them. You're saying to them, I'm okay with this fact that there's no difference between left and right anymore. I'm okay with the fact that you have basically the same policies. I have no, I'm okay with it. Just let me vote so I can have this illusion that I have a choice. It's like the drug pusher who gets the fella hooked on heroin, and then he says to him, well, you can go away anytime you want. I'm not keeping him here, but he has to come back for the fix. And so as long as we participate in this system, it's almost the more it will mock us. Democracy has become like a mockery. It's like they're giving us the finger every 4 years now. They're saying, here's what you're getting, and it's not different than what you just had. And so it's literally the case now where it's psychopaths A or psychopaths B. That's what democracy has become in the West now. And it's the same in every country. One pretend left group, one pretend right group, and there's no difference between the two. Now, I'm not trying to say that all politicians or all big business leaders are all psychopaths. Many of them are. Let's get that straight. A lot of them are not, though. A lot of them, they have a sort of proto-psychopathic mindset where they're going along with it and they're turning the blind eye. And they may be some of them may be good, decent people, but they're driven by the same insecurities that the rest of us are. And the psychopaths who really run the show, they know all this. And it's just like, there's the whole idea, they tell us things that don't make any sense to us. We have 100 days of rain, we have 1 day of sunshine, and they implement the hosepipe ban. This is crazy making. And then you say to yourself, oh, this is rubbish. And you still go out and you vote for him, and you still put him in. It's all about making us, the word would be sort of confused, bewildered. And the more bewildered and confused you are by all these crazy policies they have, the less likely you to look towards yourself for the actual answer. You become a dependent. Now, this is an amazing book I found recently. This term, trash magic, is a term I came up with out of a series of discussions with the American comparative mythologist John Lash. It's basically a word to describe what I'm talking about, this kind of idea that they're spellbinding us with bullshit. And we're so filled with it. They're throwing at us so much that we don't know what to do anymore. We can't think for ourselves because they planned everything. They planned every way of manipulating us, distorting us, and making us incapable of actually grasping our own personal sovereignty. In fact, we're actually afraid of it. We've been made afraid of it. Now, so this book, Our Master's Vice by Matt Atkinson, is written in the 80s, and he analyzes in very good detail. It's a hard book to get. If you can find it, it's well worth reading. How the Thatcher government and the politicians of the time, including Michael Foot, used speech writing in certain ways to actually change the actual emotional energy of the viewers. They would give them certain lines that were written in all caps or underlined, where they would phrase the word, drag the word out. And this is because they know the power of language. They know the power of language over the rest of us. And it got so bad with the Thatcher government that she even was at one point, her and her spin team were working together about ITV and BBC to have certain cuts of the camera. Certain camera angles would be cut at certain points in the speech where it would make you feel a sense of trust with them. A master class in this would be something like the Al Gore film, An Inconvenient Truth. You have people in the audience who are young Democrats, attractive young people, and they go, as he says certain things, and he gets all solemn at certain points, and there's one point where he rises in the air like a god, and it's all very devious, all very sneaky. But I'm sure everyone in this room is already onto it, but it's also very comical when you actually wake up, break out, and see this absurd circus for what it is. Because ultimately the psychopathic system is a theatre of an absurdist theatre. That we should learn to be more, we should be cynical, but also see that they don't have as much power as they like to make us think they do. And every word of every potential political speech is a meticulously drafted and redrafted spellbinding word. That's why they call it spelling, by the way, when you cast a spell. Spellbinding word play designed to cause superficial sensations of comfort and trust in the listener. You see, that's what magic is. People think magic is like something like Harry Potter or something like that. No, magic is actually something very real. The true definition of the word magic is to take something from your imagination and bring it into reality. Now, that could be a carpenter who thinks about building a chair, draws a little blueprint of a chair, and then builds that chair. That's the true definition of magic. He's taken it from the world of imagination and brought it into the material world. And the same thing can be done with an idea. An idea can be imposed into your head by a politician or a marketing phrase or something like that, that you yourself will believe it will transform into the material world, but it doesn't. So you're kind of trashed in what I call this trash magic thing. You're caught within the clutches. Here's an example, Obama going, yes, we can. Yes, we can, when you think about it, means nothing. It's not the same thing as, yes, we did it, yes, we achieved it. It's yes, well, we can. And then people then extrapolate that to the next stage by saying to themselves, oh, it's going to happen, it's already going to take place. And that's magic, that's the use of words, this pathological syntax, the spellbinders, but we can use that the other way around to get back at them. So it's not a one-way thing. Now, I'm actually a visual artist myself, and the art business in Ireland collapsed, and that's why I started writing books on psychopaths and stuff like that. But I'm still, at heart, someone who cares about, beauty and the actual aesthetic and stuff like this. And ever since I've been a kid, I've always been amazed as to why public art galleries are full of this crap. Right? And then you have a situation of people saying, oh, well, I don't know much about art, really. Of course you fucking know about art. You know what beauty is. You know what lovely things are. You know what makes you feel good, spiritually uplifts you. This doesn't do that. And that's what you're told to believe, that you're an ignoramus because you don't understand this. No, you do understand it. You just see shit for what shit is. And they fill it. Go to the Tate Modern in London if you want to see the zombie apocalypse. And then go over to the National Gallery, the Tate Britain, and you see the people's faces. They're completely changed. They are damaging us. They are actually attacking us, these things. And this is how they do it. This is part of destroying what they fear most about us as our soul. They actually hate the fact that deep down inside, we all know that we have a higher sense of ourselves that they'll never have. So they can never come up to our level, but they'll bring us down to theirs. And this is how they do it. And they're not just doing it with art. They're doing it with architecture, city layouts. You know, the towns they're planning now, the housing estates, the apartment buildings, bland, empty boxes that kill your soul. And also plays in this whole idea of the radical atheism agenda as well. They're trying to kill this belief that there's nothing inside you. As Richard Dawkins says, these lumbering robots. This is the skin encapsulated bag of DNA that has no higher purpose than to pass on its DNA and then become fertilizer. That's because psychopaths feel like that inside. But we don't. We know from the time we're kids that this isn't me just only in here. There's something else behind that. But this all ties into the end, this end result. But after all the years, last year, I had what you'd call a eureka moment. It dawned on me why these art galleries and public spaces are filled with this. Because this started around the same time that color advertising became really good and color printing technology became really good. Just after World War I, where they could produce beautiful billboards. And the idea was you walk into an art gallery where this stuff is in here, you come out feeling like, well, what was that? And you feel depressed and down. And then you see a beautiful ad for a Big Mac. Crazy making. And who is the biggest proponent of this stuff? Yeah. They have us by you wouldn't believe. They have us by the short and curlies like you wouldn't believe. Now, education is about closing your mind and limiting your creativity and your intellect. Yep, that's what it is. It has nothing to do with wisdom. It has nothing to do with a knowledge path. How many of you used algebra when you left? What use was logarithms and cosines when you couldn't pay your gas bill? Useless, right? The idea in this book, Ivan Illich's Deschooling Society, another one, it's easy to get this one, it's a quick read, well worth reading. And he said that school is an advertising agency that makes you think that society is fine just the way it is. And isn't that just what it's like? All the kids who could ever think for themselves or were a bit creative, they were always like, when I was growing up, the smart kids were actually put into the woodwork class and getting farmed off for apprenticeships. And all the kids who couldn't think for themselves all went into the honors classes and ended up in the civil service. They want the ones who are the most obedient. Now, I'm not putting down school teachers. I'm not even putting down the idea of education. But what we have now is not enlightenment. It's not knowledge. It's not wisdom. It's the mechanization of the human being. You know what I mean? Like, they're making us into a unit, human resources. This is how they get us again. This is how we become oblivious to the psychopathic control grid, because we're too busy being reprogrammed. Now, this is another one that's coming up more and more. It's actually died off a bit in the last year or so. This idea that we have to have reason. We have to have logic. We have to not use our emotions. We have not to follow our intuition. We should only approach things logically. And then you look at the world and it's nothing like that. It's complete chaos in business, industry, advertising, government, politics, you name it. It's complete chaos. But then they're telling the rest of us, you need to have reason and logic and stuff like this. And we're told about how scientists are the most perfect people in the world. They don't lie and they don't make mistakes. And you should trust everything a scientist tells you, or every scientific report, because that's the logical thing to do. Now, logic is fantastic for solving things on a micro level, but it's a terrible system for controlling a society, because it lacks humanity. Now, the first time this happened was in the French Revolution. This was the first time they actually came up with the idea of a society that would be built based on reason, science, and logic. It came out of the whole idea of Descartes' scientific principle, the whole idea that everything could be quantified, measured, weighed, and organized into units. And so the first time that happened was the French Revolution. And these men of reason, these men of logic, these men of intelligence, what was the first thing they invented? The guillotine. They attacked the head. That's very interesting. This is on a psychological level. Why did they attack the human head? Because they were after what they perceived was what they themselves lacked. And that's what happened at the French Revolution. The psychopaths really got into power there, and it really produced some horrific creatures. Now, contrary to popular opinion and popular sort of mythology, we're told it was all the royalists and the aristocrats that got their heads chopped off. Yeah, some did, the Bourbons and a few others. And a vast majority of people who got the guillotine were mostly poor Catholics in central and southern France, who refused to give up their religion, who refused to give up their culture, who refused to give up their sense of, they believed in God, and they were being told, they wanted to retain that in their culture and in their personality and their psychology. And it got so insane during this quest for reason during the French Revolution that they actually installed a goddess of reason in Notre Dame Cathedral that you could pray to. Madness, but this is how this is how the psychopathic minds work. And they're obsessed with this idea of consensus and reason. It's all conformity. Consensus is not the truth. It just means that some people have got together, a cabal, and agreed on something. But that's not the truth. There's a fascinating book by Rupert Sheldrake, he's a Cambridge professor, called The Science Delusion. And he shows that all this stuff that we're supposed to believe, like the crusaders like Dawkins and so on, most of it is no more proven than leprechauns. They're theories that have been accepted, everything from Big Bang, the speed of light, and many aspects of Darwinian evolution. They've just been accepted, but that doesn't make them the truth. That just means that's the guess that they're going with for now. They may be right, but that's not the same thing than telling us that's absolutely true. Now, this is the slide that caused the riot in Manchester. So if anybody wants to have a go at me now, this is the point. I am not putting down the people who joined the Occupy movement. I understand why they got involved. I know that their decency and their need for a better world is what brought them into it. But mass movements, they just don't work. They don't, because because of their very nature that they're mass movements, they become magnets for psychopathic infiltrators to move in and take them over and then spin them back towards how the system used to be. The overwhelming proof of this, every single revolution that's ever had has been taken over by them. The best thing to do is to sit inside yourself. The revolution becomes internal. And when you've achieved that sense of revolution and that state of internal sort of psychological sovereignty inside yourself, you'll find yourself attracting people to you and groups that are just like you. It's almost like a chain reaction. You understand? It's you being what makes you a human being, and the best qualities of you attracting the best qualities of others. The problem is, even if the movement is perfect at the beginning, once there's a rule book, once there's an agenda, once there's terms and conditions, they can be altered. And then when they're altered, you're altered. You're no longer a free person. So I'm not saying that the people who joined Occupy were suckers or were taken in by anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. Same with the Zeitgeist movement and the Venus Project. I'm sure many people joined those things because on the surface they sound good, but it's just the same thing. And you look at you had the Occupy movement and the Tea Party movement. The Occupy movement and the Tea Party movement were just the zombies that rose from the grave of the old left-right paradigm. And the proof of that was immediately. In Occupy Wall Street, they were all walking around wearing Obama 08 t-shirts in no time. Anyone who disagreed with them, they were calling them a right-wing conservative nut. The same with the Tea Party people. They were walking around talking about, conservative stuff after a while, and we should have religion and morality and family and all the old American conservative stuff. And it was just a sleight of hand to make you believe something was happening. But, they steer you back into the same old system. And the unfortunate thing about this is that the best elements of the Occupy movement and the best people in the Tea Party movement have so much in common. But they're still buying into this divide and conquer tactic. So that's why the mass movements and the mass political organizations or anything like that, you're always going to find that. You're always going to end up with an us and them mindset. And the most dangerous person is the man or woman who can step off the chessboard and stop being a pawn. As long as we're on the chessboard in a black or white square, they have us. When you step off the chessboard, you win. And that's what it is. It's doomed to failure. And the ultimate revolutionary act is to fire an original idea across your brain, because an individual is the most terrifying person in this kind of system, because they know ultimately that if you're strong in yourself and you believe in yourself, it spreads like a virus to others, and they start emulating it. I mean, I'll look at this crowd around here. It's a very different people that would have been attracted to an event like this even a year ago. I see a much more range of a diverse range of people. It's not just the truthers and the old awakened crowd and the alternative people. It's everybody here, and it was like that in Dublin. Dublin was a remarkable event. It was like there was Ireland right in front of me. Every social group and every ethnic group and religious group was represented there. It's because people know that we're being damaged. Something is not right here. And the ones who were the freaks and the idiots a few years ago, who were laughed at and mocked, well, got news for you. We're now the culture. We are it. This is the future. We're a wave. We're like all these things always come from the underground, and it's very interesting that so many people in this are musicians and artists and so on. This is why, when revolutions happened in the past, they would always kill the poets and so on first, because they are the ones who can really change the world. Initially, and then from that, everyone else sees the native wisdom within there. The intuitive part kicks in. And an open mind is the ultimate act of terrorism in a psychopathic society. So that's it. Always have your mind open. I'm sure I'm preaching to converted here, but don't question everything. And the individual is their worst nightmare, and they want you protesting and rioting. Oh, they're very happy to throw the tear gas and the riot police at you. And that justifies them even more. That justifies their draconian laws even more. Stay at home, but don't watch television. Think and get ready for a way of getting around this. Learn skills. Learn how to grow your own food and vegetables, and then network. Become a kind of an underground insurgent, but not in any kind of violent sense. You're using your consciousness to do it. They can't get in here yet. They haven't got the chip in here yet. This is the one place they haven't penetrated. Even with all the Irish government fluoride put into my head, they still haven't fully got in here yet. I'll tell you a story about the fluoride. But the water treatment plant from my town is very near my house. And my neighbour is one of the people who used to work there. He's retired now. And there's a windsock, like the windsock they have at airports outside the gate of the water treatment plant, right? And I asked him, what was that for? And he says, we're not allowed to open the bags of sodium fluoride if the wind is blowing in the direction of the houses. And then we put it in the water. Madness, craziness. You can't make any sense of it. And they have all these morons on the internet. Well, I won't call them morons, but they're people they haven't arrived where we've arrived yet. They have an instinctual need to attack anything new they hear, because they have this comfort in knowing things. And there's two types of people. There's two people you come up with this radical information to, and they'll be like, "What? I don't know about that. Oh, come on, it's not like that." And then there's others who will viscerally actually attack you. Like, they will see you as a threat. And these are the ones that end up as, on the internet, as the bunkers and, shills and government employees and rent-a-mob, useful idiot types. These are the ones they will cater to. That's why all the TV shows like Mythbusters and Penn and Teller and all these other shows are all designed to make them feel great. We're the smart ones, we're the logical ones. And anyone who thinks outside the box is an idiot. And all these people who claim to be skeptics, that's the last thing they are. The last thing they are is skeptics. A true skeptic is skeptical about everything. They're pseudo-skeptics. They're skeptics who believe what they really are is defenders of conformity. That's all they are. And there's no evolution in that for them or anyone else. Now, how media psychopaths alter your brain chemistry without drugs. Hey, here's the Hallmark moment. They're playing on us with our emotions constantly with love songs, sappy love films, all these sentiments, because they're aware that these create changes in our brain. The reward circuits in the brain are tuned into comforting familiar opinions and impose socially accepted values. Dopamine flooding in. Feels like chocolate. My friends are all here. We all think the same. Guy comes in the room and says, hey, guess what? Vaccines don't work. boom, norepinephrine, a stress hormone from the lower brain cell shoots up. Suddenly, they're in a flight or flight mode, nervous, right? And then the other friend turns around, oh, he's one of those nuts. He's into all that crazy, alternative stuff. And then the dopamine comes back, the norepinephrine drops, and they get back to the comforting opinion. This is why when I'm sure many of you have tried to tell people, your friends you work with, something that the average person in society wouldn't know about, and you're actually got that deer in the headlights look. That's actually a chemical response. And then you might even get them being smug and like, that's the dopamine coming back. And people are terrified of opinions and anything new to them. That's what it's like. They're absolutely terrified of anything new. Even young people, some young people are terrified of anything new. There's very little youth rebellion. That's because we have different, look at us now, we're all different age groups here. We all woke up at different ages because we were ready for this information when it came. And that's also why we shouldn't be going out of our way to force people to believe what we believe or what we're into. They'll come to it in their own time. Your job is not to be a crusader or an evangelist. Your job is to work in your own consciousness, find like-minded people just like you. And like Terence McKenna said, the others will come in time. Now, when this happens, when they get this information they can't deal with, there's disruptions in brain chemicals. And they tend to make them return to their reward circuits in order to make them feel happy, in order to make them feel better about themselves, more comforting in themselves. And that's what happens there. So it's really just a chemical reaction. Give people time, they will come back. Now, very important, if you're not willing to build your own brain circuits, they will build them for you. There's a thing now they've discovered called epigenetics, where they've shown that actual thoughts in your brain will actually reorder your brain circuits. Now, every time you learn a new skill or anything like that, you have new neural pathways, and the synapses in certain parts of your brain will fire in different ways. And if you're not doing that, if you're not actively building your brain through positive thoughts, through creative thoughts, they'll do it for you. This is why the news is always filled with repressed information. This is what they're building, a negative brain inside you. They're building a neural pathway that's designed to have you believe you have no power as a human being and you have nothing in there, because they don't want you to ultimately believe that you are a conscious being and this body, brain, 5 senses, nervous system is just a machine that you use to negotiate this reality. That's all it is. It's like saying when a TV is switched off, if Doctor Who was on the TV, or say if Tony Blair was on the TV and you switched it off like you're supposed to, that would be like a technician opening the TV and looking for Tony Blair. He's not in there. That's your consciousness. You came in from somewhere else. Now, the consciousness can't be fooled, and that's what they're doing to us. That's why they're filling us full of negativity. So here's the thing again for me. This is the ultimate way of dealing with the psychopath. No contact ever again. Non-compliance. Have nothing to do with them. Walk away, get on with your life, and act as if they never existed. Put them out of business. Do not comply with their systems. Do not comply with their agendas. Learn how to do things that you can do for yourself. If you can break bread, then you're not going to Tesco's for bread. If you can get some chickens, then you don't need to go to Sainsbury's for eggs. You do not have to pay taxes. You need less money, and you got that money for other things. And your life is instantly better because you have this feeling of independence. The same thing as someone's in a relationship with a psychopath. They'll always tell you the same thing. I'm a free person now. I've been opened up in ways that I never thought I would, because there's no contact ever again. But if you keep going back to the system, if you keep going back to this thing, what happens is you never fully escape it, because they know that they can play on you to get you back into it. And they know those comforting, familiar feelings. And let me tell you, if you break away from the system and go back in, it's going to be a hell of a lot worse than it was the first time round. It'll always be like that. So stop watching TV, or at least the trash TV. Watch decent things if you can. But there's so much propaganda on the TV today, it's very difficult. Stop buying into external belief systems. Us against them, my team, my friends. No, don't buy into anything that's been imposed upon you. Me being Irish doesn't make me amazing or special. It's an accident of birth. It's the same as anyone else's race or religion. You don't have to defend something that you didn't have a say in. Remove fluoride from the drinking water. Yep, I could talk all night about that. We'll leave that. And glossy magazines, especially women's magazines, they're attacking the female consciousness first, because they know ultimately the woman is the one who has the most intuition. And the women are the ones who usually notice things about psychopathic behavior. And so what they're trying to do is turn women into materialistic, bling collections who really don't have any feeling towards their feminine consciousness. That's a very sadistic and devious way. In my new book, Defeated Demons, I go very heavily into that. There's a chapter called Hell's Bells, and it's just basically about the destruction of the female consciousness in order to make the psychopathic system get the whole of society. You get the women, you get the mothers, you get the nurturers, the mavens, you get the sisters, you get the what men want. You see, they take that away from the men. They'll do anything to get it. Fluorescent lighting, get rid of it as well. It does not exist. The frequency of fluorescent lighting does not exist anywhere in nature, and this will cause you to have irritation. You're not able to relax. Where incandescent lighting is very similar to natural lighting. So this is another reason they put all these CFL bulbs in our houses. They don't want us having any kind of relaxing moments. The TV is going, all these cuts and all these fast edits and sound. They want us in a constant state like this because if we stop for a minute, we'd be able to think. They don't want us thinking. And understand how spin is used, especially in scientific articles. Very important, how spin works. Remember, I want you from now on, whenever you're reading a newspaper and a story designed for a scientific thing or a medical thing, like this headline will say something like, cure for breast cancer found, or new cancer drug found, or something like that, or some gene identified which causes Asperger's or autism. You go down and you read that article, and it says, a new survey suggests could well. It's not the same thing as a fact. They lie to you. They give you the story at the top, and when you read down to the text, you find that they know that most people will only remember the headline. It's just to create this total trust in science, because ultimately the psychopathic control grid is a quest from the time of Plato's Republic for a psychopathic society that's built upon a machine notion of, a science. Science is the only thing that matters, but their science is just as corrupt. It's just as corrupt. Look at all the scientists from Nikola Tesla to Wilhelm Reich who they've destroyed, and there's many, many more that we've never heard of. As soon as they had a scientific invention that was outside something they could control us with, the person nearly always died or was banished out of history. They don't want you. They only want their system in, their scientific system in, and. Put more saturated fats in your diet. Very good for building your brain structure. The brain is mostly fat. This is also why they've been telling us to eat low-fat diets, because we can't think. We're confused. If you're vegetarian, that's coconut oil. But if you're a meat eater, fish and meat and stuff like that, organic is best if you can afford it. And eggs. Build that fat in your brain. Be a meathead, because that is actually what makes you think better, because the electrical circuits in your brain work better. You're less likely to be confused. You go to the average supermarket today and you look at all the food, everything is low fat, low calories, and you look in, then there's absolutely no protein, but it's full of starches. All the stuff that damages your neuroelectrical network. And here's the most important one of all. Learn to use your intuition. Grasp your intuition. Remember that kid when he saw the politician who was going, you'll become like that if you become aware of this, and they know that once you get wise to them, they'll never bother you again. If you're aware of psychopaths are in your personal life, they'll never come near you in the job or anything ever again. They're only looking for the one. So this is one of my heroes here, Carl Jung, along with Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, and just go with your intuition. That's a voice in the background that's telling you to pay attention. And I'll finish with this, that society's collective ignorance of the psychopath has been a major, mainly hidden personal and social disaster for most of us, making us easy prey for the psychological and financial predators throughout society. And they undertake this without any guilt and feelings of remorse. Your job is to acquire this knowledge of what psychopaths are and how they function, and then get away and get on with your life, and that's it. And as soon as you know that, you're off the chessboard, and they can't play, and that's the end of it. Thanks very much.